Pacheco. I am a tribal healing and wellness court specialist with Tribal Law and Policy Institute. I am from the Pueblo of Laguna, so I'm coming to you from my home in the Pueblo of Laguna. And I have the very distinct honor of introducing a very dear friend to not only just me, but to our organization of Tribal Law and Policy Institute and our BJA 10 team. It gives me honor to introduce you to our friend Alan King. He's a consultant with us and has done many presentations and inspired a lot of presentations for us. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Alan, and he's going to get started with his presentation. So welcome. Hi, Alan.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Chris, for the wonderful introduction. So ja, te bene, she an king she. Na ajin slon since the Connie buses chain, the toy glini, this is a Jenny Edersonella. So my name is Alan King. I'm Zuni Pueblo in Navajo, and I originally reside from New Mexico, but I currently am living out here in Phoenix, Arizona. And Yeah, as Chris mentioned, I am a consultant and I work closely with tribal law and policy and many other wonderful organizations out there, especially here in the Valley, with just to name a few, Arizona Alliance for Community Health Centers, the state judicial systems, the state correctional facilities, as well as the juvenile corrections facilities as well. And on a national level as well, I am a tribal liaison for Haven Health Management, where I help tribes not only support self-sufficiency, but to help, you know, propose detox, mental health, and behavioral health programs in rural areas and helping that with programming such as that as well. I'm also a facilitator for Well Variety as well. So just many things I've come across working in this field. I used to work for Indian Health Services as well, and also the one of the largest urban programs, which is Native Health as well. So this is where my background comes around. And when Tribal Law and Policy reached out to me for this specific presentation, it is actually near and dear to my heart, not only because of helping those in recovery, but also helping those who are going through our judicial systems and trying to figure out, where do I go? How do I do this? Especially people who are in recovery or who are in active use. Um, it's really hard to understand, judicial language or medical language or behavioral health systems language, and that inside of that culture as well. And then also trying to infuse our own culture into all of this, and so and so there's a lot of things that happened here. And so, with our learning objectives today, identifying referral gaps that lead to harm for our Native clients, as we move through this presentation, I really want to invite you to be humble and stay grounded and really keep in mind that this is really for protection. I'm not trying to correct anybody here. Um, and today's programs and today's things, we're not at fault. We're also learning. We're also trying to learn how to overcome barriers, how to overcome, obstacles. Um, and we're trying to really ground a lot of pathways to really connect and have organizations come together, right? And to understand roles, boundaries between courts, clinicians, and tribal programs, and then apply that to our culture guided referral model to improve outcomes, especially with TLPI and the wellness court model, and the treatment court model. Um, so that's where we're at. This is where this presentation is coming from, and um, so we'll get started. So when systems align and lives are saved, right? Um, alignment changes outcomes, right? And it prevents people from being misplaced, overlooked, or lost. It also protects professionals from carrying uh, responsibility that was never meant to sit in one role alone, right? Many of us carry many hats. I've been a case manager, I've been in an administrative role, but when systems align, the work becomes sustainable, right? And alignment is just not good practice. It's prevention and accountability and compassion, really, really working together. And when I found this image here, it really stands with me because when departments and people come together, it really a lot of things flow. And so that's where I'm coming to this when systems align, lives are saved. And so with the next slide, we're gonna get a little deep here. Okay. Um, so you know the story behind all of this and how this presentation actually came about. Um, so out here in Arizona, Native clients were referred to Arizona substance misuse programs without proper clinical assessment. Um, this situation didn't happen because people were careless you know, or people weren't doing their jobs, right? Um, a lot of this happened because, um, we move fast. And a lot of times when we get people who come into our care, whether it's on the judicial side or the medical side or behavioral health side or mental health side, um, sometimes things are overlooked or sometimes things are bypassed. And some of these things that happen during this time here in Arizona between quite a few years back up into 2000, a couple of years ago, where the fraud scheme came out and highlight of all of this. Um, One of the biggest impacts that we've seen, all of us who are boots on ground, there's a lot of severely mentally ill patients that were misdiagnosed or properly or improperly referred out, meaning that you know a lot of situations where uh, the client was assessed over the phone, but in cases where the SMI population were just hit, they were referred to lower level programs. And these programs couldn't, adhere to these people who were diagnosed as SMI, so they had to refer them out, and that's where a lot of people got lost, unfortunately. Um, so when we speak openly about things like this, where these inappropriate placements led to clients going missing or getting caught in this fraud scheme, um, you know, it really impacted tribes, community, our families, um, trust. Trust is a huge factor right now, where we're constantly figuring out, is this program legit? Is that program legit? And and it really impacted a lot of people, not just the clients themselves, again, for the families, but people who work in this field. A lot of people have doubts about what they were doing. Even myself, I was caught up in a lot of this and seeing both sides of the story, but also working in a program, and it really hurt. You know, so this is where this came from. You know, and again, it's not about blame. I'm not here to blame. I'm not here to point fingers. But this is the truth that happened. These issues are systematic and they reflect oversight and assessments and referral pathways. It wasn't just one bad actor, right? But path towards solutions, we need to require standardized clinical assessments before placement, protect legitimate programs for inappropriate referrals, increase oversight and monitoring of referral practices, build culturally relevant and clinical appropriate care pathways with tribal input, you know. But this is where it came from. Um, and working closely with judges and working closely with probation officers, working closely with police officers, and even working closely with our elders, getting input from everybody, and seeing, this is just one of the stories of what happened here in Arizona. But it's not to say that it's not happening in other states as well. But hopefully these preventions and this presentation and other presentations that are coming from TLPI, that we can help get these stories out and get the truth out about how we can work together. And it's very important that we look at this closely. Okay, so going forward, it's not about blame again, it's about finding solutions, right? So is the presentation going smoothly? Is it going to the next slide? Right, awesome. Okay. Because I heard there was a delay earlier. I'll say, all right. So clarifying, the challenge, right? This slide is about fairness to clients and professionals. The system often asks about social workers to make referrals that are not clinically equipped for. When social workers are asked to make clinical decisions or when behavioral health is bypassed, we're placing people in positions where they were meant to occupy. And this is not a system failure, it's just a system signal, meaning that, we gotta really train our people, and really support those of clarity of our roles as people in the departments that we serve, right? Behavioral health departments, trouble are often bypassed, right? And this gap increases risk and breaks continuity of care. Um, the harder problem really is role confusion. You know, we a lot of the times, our social workers or our case managers, when the need is great, and sometimes again mistakes happen, you know. But unfortunately, what I've seen in the past is sometimes referrals from the judicial systems from case social workers, they actually do bypass assessments. They do bypass the clinical need and the clinical assessments that are required for behavioral health to get these appropriate referrals to appropriate, um, legitimate programs. And this gap, it does it increases that risk, and it does break that continuum of care. So real consequences, right? So clients with diagnosis are placed in wrong level of care, when referrals go wrong, right? Um, Recently, I had the really good privilege of sitting down with another tribe, and we went through the assessment questions, right? And when we're going through these questions, a lot of the questions were about, the assessments. Who's on your team? Who's part of the team with the behavior health? Who's part of your team on your mental health? Do you actually have a team for this, right? Um, and a lot of the times, also working in the behavioral health side of the things, a lot of the things can be bypassed where you can't tell by the first 5 or 10 minutes of seeing a person if they are mentally ill or if they're just substance abuse only, right? Um, but those when the referrals get to the programs itself, then that's when it's taken care of appropriately. And then that information should be followed back up to the referral source, which would be your tribal wellness court systems, right? So many leading programs against medical advice. This is what happens. And again, in the case of Arizona, here in Arizona, a lot of people who were referred to these programs, when they got to that lower level of care, and they did the assessment again fully there, they were, again, re-diagnosed of having mental health issues, and they left the program. And, this leads to vulnerability to homelessness or exploitation. Um, and again, the harm that happened out here in Arizona, it was so heartbreaking. Um, I'm in recovery myself, and um, I don't mean to get a little emotional here, but these consequences were real, and they are still real. And you know, if we don't talk about this openly, and if we don't talk about this, what really happened, how can we move forward to help each other, right? Um, but these are some of the things that have happened, and seeing it from when I did these assessments and when I did these questions with this tribe, and when I was helping them and listening and how they were answering, it really made a lot of clarification on the judicial side of how much they need to support the behavioral health team because they don't understand these other steps, that these additional steps that the behavioral health team needs to do to support the treatment, the tribal wellness program, right? So, so a lot of this is really about communication and supporting your team members and those who are out there who are, you know, probably like agreeing with me right now that, some of the times that communication between your teams isn't there. And these are the real consequences that happen, unfortunately. So honoring roles, right? For your team approach, our judges, accountability. They have the accountability with court orders, and things that go on site in their courtrooms. Our judicial social workers support, and with their roles is to support the judicial side, but they don't have that clinical assessment. Behavioral health departments, they do the diagnosing and they do all the wonderful treatment planning and getting them ready for the future of planting those wonderful seeds into our clients so they can start their journey of learning about themselves and learning about sobriety, learning about recovery, and learning how to taste and smell and all these wonderful things again. So um, reentry programs, integration, and aftercare. Um, the biggest thing I wanted to talk about the slide here is our roles. Um, you know, every role here, including those who cook for our clients or do transportation or who are boots on ground or administrative level or who answers the phone calls. I just want you to know that each and every one of you is very, very important and dear and a part of this whole team, a part of this whole dynamic about how we help and influence and care for the need of human life, you know, and what a judge goes through every day about how they think and the impact that they have for a person that, they're making a decision for somebody's life. And we have to think about it that way. We have to think about the social workers, and all the many the hard tasks that they have to do, and also including with the behavioral health team, dealing with the client on that level, and supporting them, you know, and then talking about the client themselves, you know, um, really thinking about how our people are, and especially those in recovery, or those who are active in addiction, or those who are just getting, welcomed into a program such as this. Sometimes we forget that what also comes with the client, which is trauma, which is, there might have been domestic violence situation, there might have been sex trafficking situation, there might have been some type of other really horrific, you know, trauma that has been instilled in this person. And those are the behaviors that we have to adjust ourselves to, whether they're in the court or whether they're in the program itself. Then on top of that, you know, from a team approach, are we checking up on our judges? Are we checking up on our police officers? Are we checking to make sure they're okay? You know, this is hard work, and to support those who are in this field. This field isn't for everybody. And I mean that from a very sincere path of going through what I've gone through as a Native American man, a Native American man in recovery, a father, a son, you know, an alumni. You know, I've been through this situation. I've been in front of a judge. I've been sitting with social workers. I've had to hear the finger pointing from my mom. you know, and I had to hear you know, listen to the reality checks from somebody like Chris, who is a licensed therapist, who's telling me the truth about my life and what it could be if I choose to take this journey of recovery. But inside of me, you know, I have to make sure I get to court. I have to make sure I go and finish this program. I don't have a I don't have a driver's license. I don't have a job. I have to take care of my son. I have to go home and be responsible and wash dishes, and all these other things that are expected of me at a program. You know, I looked up, I looked up to these people who are part of this team, and how important they are, how important their roles are, but also looking at it from a point of view that they're human too. You know, they have a life too. And to have that in mind, that to support each other, to just check on each other. Okay, that's all I'm saying. So, all right, so let's go on to the next slide. The right path referral flow, right? Going through the court system, then it goes to the behavioral health department, then the referral goes to the assessment. This is what it should look like. And the aftercare, then the cultural wraparound. This is a path that protects dignity and safety. Um, Sometimes it's easier said than done, I guess you could say. Yeah, we can put this on a board, we can put it on our calendar, You can have an amazing leader and says, "Hey, this is our week. This is what we're doing." But life happens. We get sick, emergency happens, the client AWOLs. We don't know. We know things happen. You know, but this is just a suggestion of what how a flow around how flow should look like. And make it kind of simplify it for yourselves. Um, this path, it protects with dignity and it's also with safety. And having that cultural wrap around it. Those that who work here in the urban settings, such as I do, but also I work in the rural settings as well. There is a huge difference, um, when you have cultural influence about where how do I handle situations where somebody who is and you're working with people directly on the reservation, you know, how do I wrap around that? How do I influence the cultural aspects of it? How do we as a team look into ceremonies if a client, let's say, is in our referral program and somebody passes away and they have certain ceremonies they have to do. How is your program going to adhere to that? How is your program going to look into that aftercare about that? And look into that aspect. And then also too, graduation is a big accomplishment for our clients when they graduate. What cultural wraparound are you going to do for that graduation? Are you going to have a feast? Are you going to have maybe some dancers or maybe some people come out and sing and pray for them? So this cultural wraparound, or even when you do the court systems with the judges who are, online right now listening, you know, what about if we start off from prayer, you know, start off from prayer or maybe burn some cedar or burn some sage or bring out your ceremony items, take off that robe and because I've seen it. I've seen some really awesome programs out there and cultural have influenced cultural into their judicial systems and their graduations. And shout out to Flagstaff. They're having their graduation today too. So I was invited, but I chose to be here today. So but they have an awesome graduation out there and it's really cool what the judge does. He gets off the podium and he does a whole comedy scene and just gives out gift cards and he's just in his plain clothes and they're out there just laughing and having fun, but also at the same time, he's still a judge, right? He still has responsibility of if somebody's, not adhering or doing the program that they're supposed to be. Yeah, he's got to slap those hands, right? So, no takeaways from that. But yeah, so just to simplify things, this is what, a good flow should look like. So, positive solutions, stay in your lane. Who's ever told your boss that? Not me. Right? Um, so respecting clinical boundaries, court referrals to behavioral health, not to no, not to programs directly, establishing MOUs with Indian Health Services or IHS and 638 programs, hold joint staff or referral case meetings. Um, this can be a really heavy topic, and it can be a delicate topic right here, um, because I'm not a doctor, right? I'm not gonna, or I'm not a dentist. So I'm not gonna go over and tell somebody, oh, you got a root canal, or I'm not a medicine man either. Oh, you need to go do 50 push-ups and you need to smudge yourself 7 times, you know. But what I do know is my experience and to support others who have those long-term links of of their trainings, of their licenses or of their acknowledgments of their departments and support them in that way. Um, I've seen and witnessed a program where we had the probation department on Zoom, and we had the medical doctor there, we had the behavioral health, we had the psychiatrist there, we had the the house manager there, we had a BHT there, we also had the spiritual leader there, you know, all talking about one client, and it was beautiful, you know, but everybody knew their role. Everybody talked about this, or hey, the behavioral health department was talking to the medical department and looking at lab. This was all about labs, and they were talking about, hey, this person should not be taking those meds, or and then vice versa. The medical team was talking to the behavioral health team, saying, hey, I advise that we probably should talk about the meds that they're taking, then also looking at the clinical notes saying, hey, this is why they're sleepy or this is why they're not participating in the program. But also going back and clarifying things to the probation department saying, hey, although this person tested positive for um, meth or tested positive for alcohol, it wasn't because they were using, it's because they were actually working out, and their fat cells were trying to release all those toxins in their body. So they're still coming up positive. And this wouldn't have happened if we didn't have the right people in the right meetings talking with each other and each one of them knowing their role, you know. And it's awesome. It's beautiful, and it's really cool to see these small changes like that really saves lives. And when we normalize a lot of these MOUs between court systems and actually between departments, actually, that clarifies a lot of accountability and a lot of things and efforts where you can actually get a department and you can get somebody who can be that spokesperson for that department because we're all busy, right? You're here and we're there, and we're going up here, and we're going there, and we're traveling this, and we're doing that, we're doing presentations, and we have all these assignments that are due. When do we have time to come together and do a meeting, right? So when you get a spokesperson for each one of your departments and you relay that information back to the team, yeah, it's amazing. It's beautiful, and not only are you developing a protocol of safely staying in your lane, you're actually developing a good cycle of how that communication process goes because when you start a client, you want it to go a full circle, not the client go through half the circle, then go back up because two departments aren't talking to each other, or somebody's overstepping somebody's boundaries, and it could really hurt somebody, you know. So it's awesome. That's positive solutions, right? Positive thinking. So with this, by strengthening coordinating referrals to tribal behavioral health, it is possible to significantly reduce AMA discharges again against medical advice and improve client retention. And incorporating culturally responsive and integrated approaches keep clients engaged longer and improve outcomes. Why does this matter? Um, you know, not only does your staff feel supported, uh, but it builds that trust up between the tribal entities over the judicial side with your behavioral health side. You know, um, a lot of these things where when we're talking about this stuff, you get that support from SAMHSA or these all these other evidence-based programmings that support a lot of these discharges that could be avoided, right? Um, there was a case where you know there was a misdiagnosis of a client, and what happened was the client, which is in many cases with our tribal communities and on our reserves, that this person was diagnosed as bipolar. This client didn't get along with anybody, not staff, not other clients, not other just nobody. This person was very distant from family members and has a history of being a runner because when this client was referred to the specific program, that was the history that followed this client. But when this client, you know, was approached by a team that knew the roles and actually sat down, the outcome of this was the client was never bipolar. This client was actually grieving. If you have a parent who passes, then another parent who passed, then siblings, and the people that who were supposed to be there for you, then you have the system, and a client will shut down and not have that trust factor is out the window. But when you have a team that comes together and finds that beauty in that person, it really empowers them to understand where this fight is coming from and where that distrust is. Beautifully things come out. And this person again was misdiagnosed as being bipolar. And when they found out this person was grieving, it's what they worked on with this client. And it prevented this person from AMA. You know, it these are the positive outcomes. These are the inspirational outcomes because when you can get these departments to work together and understanding their roles, you know, this is what happens, and it's awesome, and it's really cool. so, so, culture care as a safety net. Um, I think one of the biggest things for me with this, I take this slide also a little personal as well. Um, Again, I speak from a lot of experiences, especially working in this field. Um, I was working with this one program, and they asked me to help implement a cultural program into this program, and it was awesome. We started off at 5 days a week, then it went down to three, then it went down to two, then to went down to 1 hour on a Friday, which was their free day, you know, and that was the only time that we were able to implement some type of culture related programming, which was an hour wasn't even enough, right? You know, clinical treatment and traditional care are needed. They work together. You know, wraparound programs with ceremony, mentorship, and culture healing. You know, and this is what I stand by today. Culture is prevention, but treatment must be clinically guided. You know, and what I witnessed with this client, and how we found out about this person who was misdiagnosed as being bipolar, um, it was through ceremony. We actually implemented ceremony, and that's how we found out this client was grieving. And with the support of counselors during this ceremony, we were able to immediately address the one-on-ones with this client, immediately address each and every grieving moment up into where they were at present day. Um, when you find a way and work with behavioral health systems and you incorporate culture, when you incorporate traditional values, what doesn't matter if you're native or not, you know, empowering and embracing spirituality and empowering and embracing um, culture itself. It's prevention, you know, and it's beautiful, you know. But I believe in all of it too, right? You know, I with this one specific client again, if we didn't have the science, which was the lab, and if we didn't have our counselors, and if we didn't have our traditional healers working together, we probably would have never found out about what happened to this client. For them to be successful in a program, and this client was actually referred and was on probation as well, and we weren't able to give that feedback back to the court systems, and they're in the need for them to be successful graduating or completing their court well the responsibility that was the court through the court system, right? you know so this is again, this is the power, this is the influence that you can have when you work together, you know and I'm glad I left the other program because I was able to bring these other insights and these other cultural programmings to another program, and that's where the success story comes from. So awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. I have many stories of success stories, and it's just amazing. It's just truly amazing. Cool. Let's call to action, right? Let's commit to three things, okay, with everybody here. You know, refer with care, right? Let's really involve behavioral health in all our clinical decisions. Respect travel programs. Let's not bypass them. Protect lives through alignment and not assumptions. Um, it's like, where do we go from here? You know, you know, it's not about pointing fingers again. It's about building relationships and going forward. And it I know this is a tough subject. I know it's um easier said than done, I guess you could say. Um, but when we take that time to really understand about a lot of the stuff that a lot of us have gone through, um, and understand, you know, the responsibilities that each one of us have in our role in a treatment court program, and understanding the roles in behavioral health systems and and mental health systems, and then going on to another level of the adolescence. Um, it's hard again. It's hard work, and um, this is for our people. This is for our communities. This is for our elders, and especially this is for our kids. We're building a pathway and planting those seeds of hope, planting those that inspiration to our people and to our community, that we can do it. You know, and sharing my story, and Angie and Chris, they're very familiar with my story and very familiar with what I've been through, um, as a person in recovery, as a person who's an alumni of a treatment court myself. And I share this because I've learned in my recovery that I trust you with my information. And that's the goal of why we do this and why we need to come together, is to build that trust of the client who we don't know and understand yet, of why they're standing in front of you, as a person who either committed a crime, or who needs help or who needs a second chance. You know, if somebody if I didn't have those people in my life who didn't believe in me, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be here saying, hey, and talking about the truth about what has happened to our people and being vulnerable in that way, and having that empowerment to believe in myself, to sit there and talk to somebody else and share my story with them in a AA room or in a well-variety room or talking to somebody or just sitting alone with somebody. You know, I wasn't going to mention this, but I'm going to share something that actually happened to me this morning. Um, I didn't think it was going to bother me, but I think it's relevant. Um, so this morning I dropped off my daughter at school, and I was all bushy. My hair was sticking out like here. So it's like I was like, I gotta get a little decent for my presentation this morning. Um, so there was a great clips not too far from her school, and I stopped there. And when I pulled up, I noticed two gentlemen. They hurry up and the place wasn't even open yet. It was like 7:50 in the morning. They ran to the door and they got in line real fast. I was like, okay, cool. So I went and I checked in and um, you know, the one gentleman went up and he got seen, he was getting his hair cut. And the other gentleman he was with was sitting close to me, but he got up and moved real quickly, moved over. I was like, oh, okay, cool. He's sitting in his spot. Didn't phase me the moment. And then the the hairstylist, she called me up and I went up and got my hair cut. And I noticed the gentleman move away from me again to the other side. Not only did I notice this, but the hairstylist noticed this as well. And we started talking, and I started to get to know her, just her culture, the beauty, everything. She's from Mexico, and she was explaining all these things. And another gentleman came in who was of the same ethnicity of this person, and he didn't move. And right then and there, myself and the hairstylist kind of knew what was going on, um, where they judged me and felt because of who I and what I looked like. And I say this because when I was in front of that judge the first time, and many other times when I was getting arrested or doing these other things, that judgment of you're in front of me again, Alan. You got another charge again, Alan. You know, and the right path that I took today and this morning was just to sit there and enjoy a conversation with this person that I didn't know, and we just laughed and we just shared our lives and we shared our experiences, and it bypassed that judgment. It bypassed that wrong path that this person could have led me on. And it just took two of us to do that. And just imagine when two people in this field who are doing this work of how much impact you can have without judgment to take care of somebody, you know, and that's the right path. The right path isn't about policies alone. It's about presence. It's about showing up. It's about how we listen. It's about how we create safety and how we create these things without realizing it because we're so passionate about what we do, because we all have our personal stories about why we're in this field. And I want to support you on that. I want to let you know that my prayers are with you with that. You know, and every person that we walk through and every person that comes through our court or comes in through our behavioral health program, you know, it's about caring and understanding what you don't see, you know. I just wanted to share that with you guys today because I have to, I have to let it out, right? And I thank you guys for your time, for today, and really to call to action about committing to these three things about how we can come together for our people and really sustain a good referral process and a good assessment tool for that, And I want to thank the TLPI team for allowing me to come up again and hopefully inspire you guys, and but also to let you know that you're thought of, you're in my prayers, and thank you for everything that each and every one of you do, no matter what your role is. Thank you. I really, really want to thank you. So I'll hand it back over to Angie.
So, just, I
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to follow up on a couple of things that you said, brother. One, I really like the comment or what you said. Ask it's like asking the right question. And sometimes when we're either in a clinical setting or in a healing to wellness court setting, we kind of have this checklist of going through this checklist of, okay, do they meet this criteria? Are they eligible for this? And am I asking this question? But sometimes we miss out on questions like the person you were talking about who was misdiagnosed as uh, bipolar, and yet they were grieving, they were having some grief issues, and this didn't come out until later. And but what I also like in what you mentioned was that trust, um, because and I've told people this. I don't come into the field. I'm a licensed drug and alcohol abuse counselor, but I don't come into the field from a recovery background. But what I like what you said is that our participants, our individuals in Healing to Wellness Card, they're trusting us with their information. And sometimes if we live and work in our home community like I did or like I do, we do know these people. We know their stories. Kind of like what you said when the judge said, "You have another charge, Alan." Oh my gosh, Alan, you're back. You know, we tend to do that sometimes to the people that we work with when they're here, when we live and work in our home communities. But it really struck me when you said they're trusting us with their information, whatever information that is, whether it be their past, whether it be what they need, or or just whatever information. They're trusting us with that. And we should take that. We should honor that because it's hard, it's I don't like to ask for help, but it's it's like these people, these individuals that we're working with, um they also don't, sometimes they don't also like to ask for help, or help is being imposed on them. Help is being imposed through this wellness court thing. So I really enjoy those comments and those things that you said. So
Definitely for sure. And I think the other thing is about too, is sometimes we forget about, like the beginning of the presentation about language. Um, a lot of us weren't brought up around that, about how to ask for help or how to be vulnerable. We're always told to be tough up, or every time we said something or did something wrong, we were beaten, you know. Or sometimes when we do something wrong, we were smothered, or we got a gift or we got this, there's so many scenarios about
right,
somebody who's in front of us, especially when they get to that point of where they're actually committing crimes or they're getting charges, right, in the judicial side of things. And so there's something obviously dynamically there's something wrong, and so just giving that aspect and that truth about, what really goes through a client's mind and what their the expectations or just the unknown. You
yeah,
don't know until you know, but now you know that you don't know, right?
right,
And so yeah, thank you for bringing that up, and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I really enjoyed those comments. Thank you, Angie. What do we have? Do we have any questions, anything, comments in the chat box that are sticking out?
There's two comments, and while I find to read them out loud, I just wanted to invite everybody to keep adding your questions to the chat box. I also see a Q&A box being used. Feel free to add them in there. We still have 31 minutes allocated for our webinar, so feel free to ask your question, or you can raise your hand and Janice will unmute you. But the first question that had come in earlier was about the MOU when you were talking about MOUs between IHS and local behavioral health, and just looking for an example if you have one to share, Ellen.
Yeah, I do actually. If you can reach out to me, I do have MOU examples that I can share with you that, but really in these MOUs or even service agreements, they're not contracts. They're just basically just an agreement of communication, agreement of understanding that this is the shared information that we are going to be using for the client for the outcome, right? But also, it brings up accountability, especially because, you know, if I have a client who's sitting there waiting to get into a program, you have a small window, honestly. And but also, the expectations of, let's say for a client example, again, with the SMI population, what do you do if this client doesn't qualify for a lower level of care? Okay, in the MOU, it'll explain, hey, well, if this person doesn't qualify, I need to refer back or I need to refer to this other program. And it's already set in stone where, no referral step up or lower down, the client's not going to get lost, right? And the referral source, which is the court system, they know where this client's going to go in case the assessment goes to an SMI or to a lower level of care. They'll know where the client is going. So that's why those MOUs are very important. But also, I've seen, working in IHS systems, and working with, nonprofits as well. MOUs within departments is actually very successful as well. And it's not because they don't want to take the blame, or anything like that. It's just accountability and communications, and it's really assigning somebody to really communicate with the other department because you want that successful rotation, that successful management. They call it, well, in IHS terms, in billing is called revenue cycle management, right? You want that cycle management of the client to go to each department and to either be an alumni or to the client or for the client to return. You want them to fully go through that full circle. And that's why MOUs are I encourage them. They can either be used as MOUs or service agreements. If somebody needs one, just please reach out to me and I can definitely send you some examples or templates actually to say.
Thank you, Ellen. I did write down April's email address so that we can make sure that we send that example to her.
Mhm.
There is somebody with the raised hand, Farah. Janice, can you please unmute Farah so she can ask her question?
Good morning.
Morning.
Um, it's Thank you for your presentation. It's more of just wanting to share my experience being involved in juvenile healing to wellness court here in Zuni, New Mexico. In terms of the culture and tradition, when I was part of that, when the client finished each level, they received traditional regalia. And so by the time they completed the program, they had a complete outfit, like both male and female. And then we also had elders from our senior center or from our program here at the Recovery Center. We had traditional cultural elders that were involved to teach the cultural aspects of our Zuni people. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Awesome. That's amazing. That's really amazing. I kudos to you guys. That's really, really cool. I think one of the biggest things about also working in the behavioral health field and working as a cultural facilitator myself and trying to find new ways to get our people to re-identify themselves or just find that, it's in here, right? We can't wash off our nativeness, right? And because a lot of us weren't raised around being traditional or being raised around on the res. But if a program such as this that empowers the tribal member to hold that rattle again, to hold, to sing those songs again, it's empowering because, from my personal experience and when I went through going through my recovery, or I guess you'd say my sobriety, my early stages of sobriety, a lot of the times when I was actively using, I was really afraid to go back to that prayer because I thought I disrespected myself so much that I couldn't burn cedar. I couldn't and sing. I couldn't sit there and powwow again. I couldn't put on my regalia again. Um, and when I was in my treatment program, and it was here in Phoenix, and when we were meeting once a month, and because we had our own probation department, we had our own judge. It was just all us natives, gathering, and we were watching the graduations and also watching the ones who were being naughty. you know. But what was really cool about it was, unfortunately, my grandma passed during that time, and I was able to leave. I was able to take off my ankle monitor, and I was able to leave for about a week and go back and do my ceremonies and then return back to the program. And that was available for us. And I think that's really, really encouraging to know that. And that's how I really identified and started really like, wow, although I made a mistake, I'm still allowed to go home. I'm still allowed to pray. I'm still allowed to do all these wonderful things. And so that's inspiring. You really that's really inspiring. Um, I want a regalia. so, so that's really cool. Thank you, Farah, for sharing. That's really awesome. That's really, really awesome.
Thank you, Ellen. Candace, I saw your request for the same example of the MOU. I'll be sure to send that to you as well. So we have two more questions that I see, Joy. But before we get to Joy's, I wanted to ask this one that came in earlier, Ellen. Do you have recommendations on working with clients who may not have been involved in any type of cultural experiences or have a different perspective on spiritual or cultural activities because they may be from a different tribe or were not taught those things?
Yeah. My recommendation for that is, you know, really finding a good facilitator. That's your key. You um, when you empower other spiritualities, um, you know, I think really just being very simple, right? Just as going as basic as the representation of the medicine wheel, those four colors, right? And when those four colors come together, and when you actually conduct a talking circle, inside that talking circle, when people come together, that's a form of prayer, right? And then we start giving out examples about how sacred that circle is. You can go into a little bit more depth and clarity about when people come together, when they eat, you pray. Or when you come into somebody's house, you come and pray. when you go into a Hogan, you go into teepee, or you go into sweat lodge, or when you go into church. And always a reminder that when you do and you're facilitating these cultural programs into a program or helping somebody who is raised Mormon or raised in Christianity, um, that their prayer is just as powerful as anything, and to have them believe and to embrace that, you know. I think that one of the biggest examples that I try to do myself when I'm out there is I don't tell people not to do drugs or drink or do alcohol or anything. I don't do that no more. It's not my place. And it's the same thing with people who, when I burn cedar or when I pray or when I sing or when I dance, but I let them know that I pray for them, but I don't push that onto them, if that makes sense. Because what I'm trying to do is help them really understand that the day that they were born, and just like everybody here, the day that you were born, somebody prayed over you, and that prayer followed you, and it is the reason why you're here today. Creator has a purpose for you, and those eyes, and in that way, you use that, whether it's going to be through a Bible or through at an altar or through your dancing or through your ceremonies, you know, and teaching these guys that when they're in early in their recovery, that they're learning how to see, smell, touch, and hear things for the very first time again. And that's how we approach our spirituality as well. And it's okay to bring that stuff up, you know, and keeping it mutual, you know. So that's one of the ways I do it, you know. I know there's many other ways, but I think that's hopefully that can help you, you know, if you're in a program or if you want to reach out to me, I can definitely we can go into further discussions about this. But I that's how I would do it, um, you know, because that's also a very touchy subject because a lot of the again, I'm gonna be very honest, you have your traditional uh, natives versus your non-traditional natives, and there's a little clash there, of how spirituality is. But when you get them to empower each other and support each other, it's different, but the goal is here, the main thing that everybody has a comparison is they're in court. So, that's the similarity there, so that's where the two people who have two different differences, having them understand that you're in this area for a reason, and they're saved. So I hope that answers that. It's a long answer, but I hope it clarifies something.
Yes, thank you, Ellen. It's all great information and helpful as you speak from your experience. So much appreciated. I did want to maybe point our attendees to the comments only because there's some really great suggestions coming in from other attendees here as well. So just take a look at those. There is another question, Ellen, and it's regarding the line between enabling and supporting. And the example given is not having a driver's license, but needing to get to a scheduled screen or court hearing. A short-term solution could be case manager doing the transportation versus a long-term solution of a participant being fully responsible. Sometimes the team disagrees on the best course of action. So any thoughts on that?
Um, I think the biggest thing here is when positive thing here is that there's suggestions, right? There's resources that are already implemented on the table. Um, and I think the biggest part about with this presentation, but with a lot of the other many things that we do out there. Um, I think the hardest part about what we do and in our role and staying in our lane is our job is to plant seeds, you know, and how they utilize those resources is up to them. I'm speaking again from total experience because I rode my bike, I rode my skateboard, I borrowed, I asked for rides, I made extra money to get bus passes. I did whatever it takes. Did whatever it took to get there. Um, but if there is resources, by all means, give those resources out. Bus passes. If you're in an urban area, um, for bus passes, I don't know if I know for here in Arizona, um, you can get your behavioral health counselor or psychologist because alcoholism is a disease, so you actually can get a discount for bus passes, and you can fill out that form so you can get a lower rate on your bus passes. So that's another idea. Um, but I don't want to discourage people from not trying to provide as much resources as we can. You know, if the client is taking advantage of it, you might want to nip it in the butt, you know, so to speak. But it is going to be up to your protocols and your policies and procedures. Um, but I think across the board, if it's going to be for one client, I think it should be for all clients. Make it universal where these resources and availabilities for everybody. You know,
Al,
but I think the more resources it is, the more resources you can get.
yeah, Alan, I just also wanted to add, I know that um, some of our some of our healing to wellness courts are in rural communities, and so this is from my experience when I worked with my healing to wellness court in the Pueblo of Laguna. We would sometimes, and it just kind of naturally happened. It wasn't anything that we encouraged, but we offered it also as we offered an incentive. So we would have some of um, our participants who are in like phase 3 or phase 4, and they were doing well. And they would offer rides to those individuals. Like they would offer a ride, they would pick them up to go to AA meeting, or they'd pick them up to go to certain group or something. And sometimes we were very fortunate. I think we had maybe one or two alumni who also did that just like soon after they had graduated. And what we did in turn was we gave that person an incentive because we heard about it and we said, great. And we gave like gas cards or gas vouchers or something to help them with that. So that's something that you can incentivize in your Healing to Wellness Court participants who are in the latter phases, but who are also doing those kind of things. So just a suggestion.
Yeah, definitely for sure. We had the kind of the same similar thing with our court when I went through my situation. It was when we were at I think phase three, getting close to phase four. Phase three is where they were actually giving out, you know, free bus passes and free train rides. So that was pretty cool. Um, and I think that's a very encouraging, but also too, again, I think it just goes back to where really monitoring, how the use of the transportation or trying to get people to their programming, how it's being utilized, where it's to and from, not A, B, C, D, E, and F, then go to programming. you know. So, can't bring your laundry with you. We can't stop at the laundromat. So on the way to programming, And because I'm just speaking from my point of view, because again, I come from the survival mode of a guy who was out there actively using. How am I going to take advantage of the system the best that I can? How am I going to squeeze whatever resources out of you? and make it my program, not your program, you know. So, and again, it's just the truth, you know. And a lot of us who have been there, try to take advantage of the system. But I think really when you create these protocols and policies for incentives, have really that guideline, and make sure that this person is earning these incentives because they're doing really well in their program, but also this person can't get their license in another 6 months or whatever, because you have to really look at this person might be taking their kids to school, or they might have 3 or 4 jobs, to make ends meet, or they might be taking care of their grandma or grandpa. It might be winter time, especially in a rural area, 2 hour delays, a lot of these things come into play. So just again, be creative. That's my suggestion. Be creative in your incentives. Be creative in how you can support the people in your program.
Thank you, Ellen. We have another question. Brenda has her hand raised, so if you could unmute her, she can ask a question.
Good morning. Good morning, Ellen. Good morning, Christina.
Hey, Brenda.
Um, so I just wanted to kind of add and share for what our Healing to Wellness Court program does, regarding, connecting our participants with what their religious preference is. We do have that in our community, those who are more Christian faith-based versus those who do practice tradition. So we had decided that we would come up with some like a questionnaire, but it's not. We were adamant that we didn't want to just give them a questionnaire and mark the boxes on what you believe and what you don't believe. More so a guide for when we get a new participant, and me as the coordinator sitting down with them and establishing a relationship with our participants and using this questionnaire more so as a guide. One of the things that we had identified was not all of the participants are going to come in and be at a place where they want to establish, or they don't have an established relationship with their higher power. Some of them, what they went through in their addiction, and even before that, before their addiction, sometimes, life was really hard for them and they're still having some resentments. They're questioning God, they're questioning their higher power. So, one of our first questions was, are you interested in establishing or reestablishing a relationship with, whatever religion they were from, or, with, going back into ceremonies and learning more, or their faith-based community. So that was our first, I guess our first thought was we need to make sure that they are at a place where they want to reconnect. And if they're not, then, we'll respect that and we'll just work with them and try to make sure that that's incorporated in their treatment. We have asked some of the questions are, are they comfortable receiving incentives that are culture-based, or would they prefer incentives that are more faith-based? And we've also thought of tradition is very different from culture. We wanted to try to make that distinction because we do try to ask, or we try to work with them when they're treatment team for culture-based assignments. So we have worked with them on assignments like getting a basic understanding just of our tribal seal. Are you interested in learning what our creation story is? Are you interested in learning what our clanships are? And, just trying to scratch the surface where it's not really going into tradition, but still leaving the door open for culture. So we do have a questionnaire that we did kind of design, but it's not to give the clients, it's for me to guide this conversation with the participants so we can get a better understanding and measurement where they are, what they're willing to do, and what, you know, what they want to work on. And we reincorporate this about 90 days down the road just to see where they are. And, you know, some of those who maybe weren't at a good place where they weren't ready to start a new, you know, reestablish a relationship. Where are you now? Are you interested? What's happened? You know, things of that sort, just almost like a measuring tool, but in a non-formal way where I'm using it to guide conversation and just trying to understand where they are.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
You reminded me of something that I also wanted to add into all of this, and that's a perfect example of of the just the introduction of, you know, when you're out there actively using or standing in front of a judge or whatever, you're not thinking about spirituality at all, right? You know, you're just like, where am I going and where are you sending me to, judge? You know, but the thing I like about this with White Mountain Apache and what they're doing amazing things up there. This also brings up another thing about if there's any behavioral health programs here or any probation departments who are working with behavioral health departments, and they're giving you feedback that somebody's not participating, it's not because they're not participating, it's just because this isn't part of their upbringing. They weren't raised traditional, or they weren't raised in Christian, or they weren't raised around AA. They're not, it's just respecting that value that this person has. You know, just because somebody doesn't isn't participating doesn't mean that they don't want to. It's just because that's how they were raised. And I think that's a lot of things that need to be discussed as well, to have that understanding that, you know, just because somebody doesn't participate doesn't mean they don't want to recover or they don't want to be sober. It just means that's just their boundaries, their safe boundaries. So thank you for that, Brenda. That was awesome.
Is there any other questions or anybody in the middle of typing a question? Feel free to finish that. We'll see it on our end. But Chris, I'll turn it back to you.
So once again, we'd like to thank you for joining us today. We'd like to thank our presenter, Alan Keene. And yeah, so we will have Alan join us many times before. So if you missed him, if someone missed him, or you found any information valuable that you'd like to pass on, this session is recorded, and so it'll be on our website. And also, there's, like I said, many other opportunities for Alan, for you to see Alan in action. At this time, we'd also like to ask you to please complete the evaluation. Here's the QR code on the screen. Janice has also placed the link in the chat box. We value and appreciate any feedback and all feedback that you give us. It helps us to get better. It helps us to learn what is important to you, what topics are important to you. As a TTA specialist, I have the advantage of going out into different tribal communities and listening to what their needs are, and then bringing them back to our team and saying, hey, you know, this tribe was dealing with this issue, and you know, it's similar to what's going on here, and let's find a topic. Let's find someone who can do good presentation, or let's do a resource. So we really value your evaluation, and we value your feedback. Next slide. And in the very last slide, when Janice gets ready to pull it up, you will see all of our contact information. We've put Alan's email in the chat box for those of you who were interested in the MOA that he mentioned or interested in getting in touch with him. So that's in the chat box. Also, here's how you contact us. Any wellness court information can be collected or can be seen on the wellnesscourts.org. Also, any enhancement training information can be gathered there at that website. This is any past presentations that we've done in past enhancement trainings, PowerPoint, complaints, anything like that, that's where that lives. And then also, you are more than welcome to email us at wellness@tlp.org. And that comes directly to Angie, Jacob, Janice, and I, where we can, you can do any TA requests or any, hey, I have a question, or, I missed this, or can I get this recording? So you can reach us there, as well as we have our individual emails, but you can reach us there. And once again, on behalf of our management team, Jerry Gardner and Heather Valdez Friedman, we thank you. We thank you for joining us.